there! I know Polly is usually the one reviewing books, but as I read through my bookshelf, I thought I might give it a try. And the first book on my shelf is one that I haven't read in a few years, and sort of forgot I had. A Little Princess by Francis Hodgson Burnett. This story was published in 1905, started as a play, and has been made into a couple movies over the years, so spoilers, I guess? Time to ramble. Ow. Anyway, the story begins with Sarah Crewe and her father on their way to Miss Minchin's Select Seminary for Young Girls. What a lovely name. Here we are introduced to a number of characters. Our protagonist, Sarah, is described as an odd girl with dark hair who does a lot of supposing. She enjoys imagining and making up stories, which made me think of Anne of Green Gables. See, that book was published 3 years later, so the similarities in characters and tone might just be characteristics of the time, but Anne is still sitting on my shelf. We'll come back to her another time. We also meet Captain Crewe, a young man with more money than sense, and Emily. Captain Crewe loves his daughter and dotes on her, buying her many clothes that are far too fancy for a growing child, and a special doll, Emily. Emily follows Sarah through her trials and challenges throughout the book, reminding us and her about where she came from. So Sarah's first few years at the seminary are good. She's described as Miss Minchin's show pupil. She's shown off as the perfect student, surprising her instructors with her perfect French, which she learned from her French mother. Her fashionable and expensive clothes make people take a second look and believe that the seminary is a very respectable school, if someone so well-to-do attends there. But it's the way Sarah acts that really sets her apart. We learn through the first few chapters that Sarah is kinda weird. Not only does Sarah have many luxuries, she also has a pony, a maid, and her own sitting room. These things the other girls don't have, and many are very envious because of it. Sarah is also telling stories to the other girls in school. Most of them are fictional, but they're usually based on something she has experienced or read about. And Sarah is quite the reader. Her interests take her through European history and many of the classics, as we would call them today. Sarah has more patience than many of the others, including the teachers. This patience allows her to befriend Ermengarde. It's French. I don't know how to say it correctly. Either way, she's a girl who struggles to keep up with her academics. It also allows her to adopt Lottie, a much younger girl who learned tantrums would get her what she wanted. But Becky is probably one of the most important people Sarah befriends at this time. Becky is the scullery maid. She's half-starved and generally miserable from the mistreatment she suffers, but Sarah doesn't order her around or look down on her. Instead, when Becky and Sarah first meet, Sarah tells the other girls stories that capture her imagination. Becky begins going through her chores as quickly as she can, just to spend more time with Sarah at the end of the day. Sarah, to her credit, also buys food for the other girl. Sweets and such at first, but when she learns which foods are more filling, she begins to concentrate on those. About 4 years after our story starts, things start to change. Captain Crewe is investing in diamond mines. These ventures are very high risk, high reward, and everyone's excited about it for a time, right up until Sarah's 11th birthday. Then disaster strikes. On Sarah's birthday, at her birthday party, news is delivered. Sarah's father is dead. Miss Minchin, who had always been jealous of Sarah, had spent so much money on the girl and her party, money that would never be repaid. Sarah becomes a servant girl with Becky. While her tasks are different, such as running errands, teaching the littles, studying to become a teacher, her treatment is the same. All Sarah has left is a black dress that doesn't fit well, and Emily, who she refused to give to Miss Minchin. Her room and sitting room were taken from her, and she now lives in the topmost attic, sleeping in a room lit by candle and skylight, with an unlit fireplace and a hard bed. Sarah chooses to remain a princess. She takes her inspiration from prisoners of the Bastille in France and tells Becky many stories about it. Sarah refuses to lose her temper, no matter what she's put through, which is typically being withheld food, and this makes Miss Minchin and some of the girls uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable. One day, Sarah is running an errand and finds some money in the snow. She checks in with a baker to see if anyone had lost it and then buys some hot buns. She then gives the food to a beggar child. Sarah's actions inspired the baker to feed other hungry children. Now, Sarah's life kinda sucks, but things start getting interesting here. See, someone moves in next door. Sarah calls him the Indian gentleman because he's clearly been living in India recently. Judging by both his decor and his actual Indian servant, the man's name is Mr. Carrisford. He's been ill and is on a quest. His servant, Ram Das, meets Sarah one day and begins entertaining Mr. Carrisford with stories about her and the attic she lives in. Together, they come up with a plan to give Sarah some of the things that make her life more comfortable. Things like food, a good bed, warm blankets, a fire for that unlit fireplace, books, warm clothing, and things to eat. Sarah shares as much as she can with Becky. Now, Mr. Carrisford had invested in a diamond mine with a friend. Things had looked bleak for a while when he became sick and his friend died, but then things at the mine started to improve, and Mr. Carrisford decided to look for his friend's daughter. A daughter who had been sent to a boarding school and was apparently left penniless. I wonder if you can see where all this is going. In a strange and totally unforeseeable twist, Sarah ends up knocking on Mr. Carrisford's door. You see, his pet monkey had snuck into her room last night, and she needed to return the little creature. Believe it or not, they all start talking, and Sarah is revealed to be the girl Mr. Carrisford was looking for the whole time. He brings her to live with him. Her fortune is restored, and she is once again a princess. Now, for those of you who might want to see some revenge against Miss Minchin, never fear. She marches over to Mr. Carrisford's home right away, right after this revelation, just to get Sarah back. Well, to get her servant back. She leaves with the reputation of her school tarnished. Sarah refuses to return, and Becky goes to work for Sarah. The story doesn't tell us that the school was closed or that she went bankrupt, but just like Sarah, we could always suppose. See, I honestly enjoyed this book. It's an easy read, and you can find yourself sympathizing with the characters. There's no dark and depressing danger. While it isn't lighthearted all the way through, it does have a pleasant, matter-of-fact tone to it. Admittedly, some of my enjoyment might come from nostalgia. I did read this a time or two when I was a kid. It may not have been one of my favorite books, and still isn't, but I think it's worth going back to and reading every so often. I give this book a 4 out of 5 beans. Also, as I am usually the crafter person here, I made Sarah and Emily. You can check them out on my Etsy page, The Reeve and Knitter. I should probably do more knitting. See you next time!